looking forward um, to having this conversation with you because a lot of people have um, been interacting with us in reference to what one of the topics of um, our series that we're working on, which is the weapons of our warfare. And we were talking about strongholds and things that kind of mental blocks to kind of hold people back in a progress and relationship with the Lord and in a relationship with life as well, you know. And so me looking at it, being a theologian from a theological perspective, and I wanted to reach out to you because I know this is kind of what you do in this behavioral world. That's your area of expertise. So I wanted to reach out and just kind of have a conversation with you in reference to these things from a, I don't know, maybe a professional or clinical perspective. So
Okay.
I want to introduce my guest to you today, Aisha Luton. She has a master's degree in social work. She was licensed as a social worker in 2022, though she's been working in services for more than 10 years. Aisha has been a support for others through her volunteer work in youth and adult prison ministry and co-creating and co-facilitating a reentry program targeted to help both men and women obtain and maintain employment. This program helped build self-esteem, improve communication skills, and develop and sustain healthy relationships while working on changing destructive thoughts and behaviors. Aisha also received training in a couple communication and mediation. She currently she works in community mental health as a behavioral health therapist and has worked with a variety of populations and disorders. She has a lot of experience and skill in this area, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and want to say welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me just say that there are a lot more people that have a lot more experience than me. Let me just say that, but I will do what I can.
But I will say this for disclosure that there is no one who has more experience and skill than you in this area that is also my sister-in-law.
Oh,
I've
yeah,
been
I'll take that.
so I'm married to her sister. We've been married for 25 years, so we've been family for 25 years and even longer than that. So
Yeah,
yeah, full disclosure. But
yeah.
yeah, so I want to thank you. I know your time is precious and I know you're busy and you're actually out here in the field working, like helping people with like real problems. And that's one of the things that me and you kind of had in our conversation was how there seems to be a lot of theoretical or theological theory behind a lot of things in religion, if you will, but not a lot of practical, pragmatic help or dealing with actual, real hard topics that people in life have to deal with, and just the reality of life, you know. And so we were talking in our series about strongholds and
Mhm.
scripture talks about in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5 that talks about how we need to tear down these strongholds, these thoughts, these things that build barriers around our mind that we use to push and we keep God out with those, you know.
Yeah,
And what I had mentioned was one of those strongholds that we build is abuse, and trauma causes us to build various strongholds in our minds, and sometimes those things that we build to protect ourselves actually wind up making us a prisoner in our own thoughts that are competing against what God is trying to break through the truth of the situation, and just
mhm.
you know those basic strongholds and tearing those mental barriers down between us and God.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. What I what I see is that, well, let me first say that trauma and abuse are one and the same,
Mm,
right? Because when you experience abuse, it's trauma, right? And so trauma looks different for everybody. It could be something like a car accident, or it could be something like rape, or it could be something like abuse in childhood, you know, it could be neglect. And so it just looks different for everyone. And I think the important thing is, how do we address trauma? And many times it goes unaddressed. And so when trauma goes unaddressed, it impacts the way that we see people and the world.
Mm,
Um, and so when we see people, um, we can be, um, let's see, affected by the things that they do. And a lot of times people don't realize that other people are um, have trauma in their lives, and that is the reason why they react that way. So when we see people, we don't know exactly what they've been through. And that's why we shouldn't really judge, because we don't know what they've gone through. And let me also say that trauma can also um, cause people to develop depression,
okay.
anxiety, psychosis, um, and just other things, and other disorders. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you don't think about that when you look at a person. You see a person and you may see their current behavior, but you don't know what led to that current behavior. You don't know what experiences they've been through, what may trigger them, and how they react once triggered, right? So
Correct.
what you're absolutely right. One of the things that I think that we fail to do um in the church is, we fail to address trauma, right? We
Mhm.
overlook it, we ignore it. We say we're going to pray about it. Don't get me wrong, prayer is a powerful tool that we ought to use, but it's not the only tool that we ought to use. Uh,
Mhm.
we are mind, body, and soul, and so we need to do things on all of those fronts, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So, some things you can't just pray about. You have to do some mental work for them. You have to do some physical work in reference to them. And I remember
Mhm.
talking to you and asking you about uh, your actual work and dealing with people that's in a situation where they're experiencing trauma. And I asked you, like, how do you, talk to them, deal with that if they're currently dealing with trauma? And you said the first thing that we have to do is physically remove them from the trauma. Like, wow.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. Like once we're aware of it, right? Mind, body, and soul, we got to get the body protected before we start trying to deal with the mental aspect or the spiritual aspect. We got to deal with the physical aspect, right?
Right.
It
Right.
is hurting this person in their current situation right now. And before we can start looking at other things, we want to start trying to, if possible, get them removed from that situation.
Right. So it's almost like, if you're in a burning building, right? Do you start trying to help a person that's in the burning building, or do you remove them and bring them to safety, right? So safety is the first thing that we need to think about. Are they in a situation where the thing that the trauma is uh, continuously happening, or it's happening, um, constantly? Um, because how can you help someone if they're in a situation where they're being constantly abused? Will the help that you provide them be effective? And it may not be effective because they're still in that abusive situation, right? It's still occurring daily, hourly, whatever it may be. So, we have to make sure that people are in a safe situation. So and one of the things that we talked about was church hurt, right? So if a person is, experiencing abuse at a church,
Mm.
right? And they don't want to hear what someone else has to say, because they're probably thinking it's not going to be any different.
Mm,
These are the things that happen, like it changes your mentality. Like, you know what I mean? Um, and so when you're dealing with trauma, it takes time to heal. And it takes and healing may not be like they're gonna be all better, you know what I mean? And
mm,
the trauma, like let me put it this way.
mm,
You fall, you scrape your knee, it gets bloody, there's a scab, it heals, it falls off, but you still have, right, the area where you can see the
mm,
scar, right? So there's
mm.
always going to be a scar, but how do you manage your thoughts and your feelings from now on? Are you able to deal with those things that remind you of the trauma that you experienced? Are you able to say, um, yes, I've been through that, but I'm not in it any longer, and I can, I don't have to go back there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like the car accident, you know what I mean? Your trauma, you can be oh, and let me just say that trauma, when I say trauma looks different for everybody,
Mm.
it doesn't have to occur right away. You can be, it can occur today, it can occur tomorrow, it can occur next month, it can occur next year, or it can occur in the next 10 years.
Really?
Yes. So when I say trauma affects everyone in different ways,
Mm.
it doesn't have to be immediate. And oftentimes people may not know how they were triggered by that trauma if it's 10 years down the line.
Wow.
Hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's something you don't necessarily think about, you know, but I think that a lot of times we handle things, um, we don't have anybody to help us navigate these situations like we're talking about right now, you know.
Hmm.
So we handle them the best way that we can, right? We deal with life the best way that we can. Um, I had a coworker who was just experiencing a whole bunch of just things in his life, and I've been asking him to talk to somebody. There's a
Hmm.
line to talk to because he has no one to talk to, and males, and especially as Black men, we feel that it makes us weak. Or appear weak when we share our feelings and our emotions and hurt
Hmm.
and trauma. It makes us somehow feel lesser. So we have a culture where we don't really talk about these things and we kind of hold them in, but then we explode, then we blow up, and then don't know why we blowing up, or we got an
Hmm.
idea of why we blowing up, but we think it might just be from some recent trauma. But what you're suggesting is that it actually could be accumulated trauma, not just the recent, but the things that's happened prior to that that I haven't addressed, that I haven't dealt with, that I haven't talked to anybody about, and they just keep piling on and piling on and piling on until just one day I just vent and do something that's completely out of character and completely unlike me, but is the only way I know how to react or deal with this um situation is just keep building in my life. It's like they say pressure bust pipes, so
Hmm.
how do you relieve some of the pressure in those situations? And what I'm suggesting, kind of in a theological way, is that we build these strongholds to do that, right? We kind of build strongholds. Let's just say that we have a stronghold of feeling worthless. Somebody at one point in our lives who had influence over us, or maybe abused us, or
Hmm.
convinced us that we were worthless, that we have no
Hmm.
value, and so we started building that stronghold, and then we ourselves start believing that we're worthless and we have no value, and when things happen we kind of put it back on ourselves, right? That we're worthless. And then God comes with his word and he knocks on the stronghold door, and he yells out, no, you are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Hmm.
Like I have a purpose for you. I made you. You are valuable to me. I crafted you. You are unique above anything else in creation, right? But then your stronghold sends out the arguments, right? So there's an argument that comes out and it argues with God at the door as to why I'm unworthy to accept what God is saying, and they go back into the stronghold and lock itself in, right? So
Mhm.
these things that we've built, they actually argue against the truth that God is trying to bring in. And so what you really need to solve the problem is what God is trying to bring in, like that sense of self-worth that he gives you, that his word gives us because of how unique we are in his creation. But the stronghold, which is built to, in some sense, help us vent, right? We go in this little area and we can, we can I don't want to say how we can stay in this little area and feel comfortable because we at least we know and here we know what it is, right? We know that we got an answer for some of these things, that even in this state we could feel comfortable here because it's what we used to, is what we believe. And God comes and disrupts all of that to give us the truth of his word, but we fight against it with the arguments that we've built up in our own strongholds.
Mhm. So, right, exactly. And so it's like, he's our father, right? And so, but we have earthly parents. And so, like, when we are young and they're trying to teach us certain things, those are our beliefs and our values that we grow up with, that are often times oftentimes people have a difficult time making us disbelieve those things, right? So if you bring
Nice.
a child up and
Mhm.
you teach them that they are worthless, how do you get rid of that thought,
Wow.
that belief in themselves that they are nothing, right?
Mhm.
So when we have trauma, it can do the same thing, right? It can make us fearful. We avoid certain things.
Mm.
We avoid addressing the trauma because we don't want the memories or the flashbacks or the nightmares, or we're like really hyper vigilant where we're just like, what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Is
I
is
did.
is is something gonna happen? We sometimes isolate ourselves. We have persistent negative thoughts about ourselves. We just can't be happy. We're irritable. These are all things that, that sometimes people can experience. And so you have to be able um, to help them change their mindset and I think that love is something that I think that love is something that we can, that God gives us to
Mm.
use against that. And so if you are, people want to be accepted, they want to be loved, they want to feel appreciated, they want to feel safe. All of that is part of love, right? So, but in addition to that, we also have to have practical things that we do to help them get through that trauma.
Yeah, so that's one thing I was thinking about. Like I had been doing some reading up on some qualities of hats and robes that pastors wear, and one of the things that I learned was they kind of talked about emotional IQ, or dealing with behavior and feelings, and that how many of us as pastors have a low emotional IQ. Like we really don't understand a lot about behavior and about
Mhm.
what motivates and drives people, and we kind of put everybody in one big box and to try to address everybody accordingly, but that you can't necessarily do that because, like you
Mhm.
just said, all of us experience trauma in different ways. All of us process it in different ways, and the old school way was just kind of hard, like just get over it, just deal with it, just
Yeah.
right, and just man up on it and aggressively are. And that doesn't always work. Like that's not always an effective solution, right? To how you
Mhm.
deal with it. And many times it's unfortunate because you wind up making the person, the victim, you wind up turning them into the bad guy, right? Like you victimize them all over again because you blame them, like, well, they should have been this and they should have been, like you said earlier about church hurt or hurt. People say, well, the people should have been stronger and they should have been tougher and they should have been. So what about the culprits of the hurt? Like, what about those who hurt them? Let's look and evaluate the cause of it. Let's just look at the victims and blame them and say they should have been, they should have. No, no. What should we have done to prevent that from ever even happening? Right?
Right.
What's going on inside of our DNA and our houses of worship where we making people feel that they're not welcome and they're not comfortable and they're not worthy or whatever the situation is? Why you blaming them? And many of them are like babies, right? Like, I don't know. It's just horrible. It's a horrible analogy, but it does happen. But when you take a baby somewhere, we just gonna say a church is like a daycare, right? And then when people get saved, they're like baby Christians, right? So you got all these babies. You wouldn't take your baby to a daycare where the staff would abuse them,
Right.
but they will hurt them. Like, and they babies. So when they come in, they babies. So if you're gonna work here, you need to understand when babies come in here, they babies, yeah, they're gonna throw up sometime. Yeah, they're gonna need a diaper change and some poop gonna come out. They babies, yeah, they're gonna cry sometime, right? They're gonna be messy. It's a messy business. But they babies, and you just said the word, love them. You love a baby. You take care of a baby. You don't abuse a baby. God forbid. Why would you do that? But yet in our churches, it seemed like the babies get abused. And anybody stopping and say, wait a minute, who running the daycare? Why in the heck are all these babies getting abused? They running out talking about the baby should have been tougher. They babies. You expect that out of babies. So I don't know why we expect it out of newborn Christians and those who may have weak faith and need to be strengthened, which is the reason why they come. So
Right.
we had talked about that as well, and that is another form of trauma, right? People get hurt, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not always, physical. It's not always sexual.
Right.
It's not always those type of trauma, accidents and crashes and things like that. You can be hurt, and I've been hurt. Which is very, very sensitive to that, and something that really needs to be talked about and needs to be addressed. In detail with plans as to how to facilitate it, how to prevent it, and when it does come up, like you have suggested, not just talk about it, but what's a plan to deal with it, which is why we need to kind of have these conversations, and pastors need to have access to people that they trust, like yourself, that's saved, but also understand behavioral science, right? Because there are certain behaviors that we need to address, and how do we address those and not just ignore them, like has historically been done in our congregations, right? uh, and,
Right.
and talk about them, yes, but not just talk about them, but the talk should lead to an action plan that should lead to um, some improvement, right? Some less people getting hurt. So I think it's a good ideal, that something that I will eventually implement is, to have a conversation with people and ask them, especially people that come from Christian experience or left other churches. Hey, why'd you leave the other church? Hey, what happened over there? Like, really give me a detailed experience as to what negative things happened that led you away from that congregation, right? What things, what did you see? What did you experience? And then we can start talking about that and processing it and dealing with it.
I agree with you. I think that and so when we're talking about trauma, we are also talking about not just the physical, but the emotional part of it. So it's an emotional distressing, could be an emotional distressing event that occurs. And so when we're talking about people who come into the church, they come in because they want to be healed as well. And so they're looking to be healed. And how are they being healed when they, number one, have a hard time talking about the things that are going on in their normal every single day lives.
Right.
And when people are kind of bashing them over the head with, you have to be this, you have to be that, and then they withdraw and they don't want to to talk about these things and have someone to really listen. And
Mm,
so that, I mean, I think that that's important too. So you mentioned like asking them, why did you leave? You know what I mean? Just because they could have left, because it was just some situations that caused them to leave that kind of hurt them. They want to find somewhere where they can be a part of and where they're going to be nurtured. And I think that was the other thing that I wanted to say, was that when you go to come to church, you want to be nurtured,
mm-hmm.
right? And so, and I think that that's something that we all should do for one another, right? Is we need to nurture one another, to lift each other up so that they have that feeling of safety within the body that they're in. So unfortunately, too many of members just, I mean, I don't know, I guess there's just really, they have a hard time having an outlet. They have a hard time really letting their hair down and being who they are, and needing that healing that is offered within the congregation, within the body of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make sure that people who are we encounter get that love and care that they need? Because we're preaching, we go out to like preach the gospel so that people will come to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But are we pushing other people away by the way that we deal with them?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so
Right.
how do we not do that? And
Exactly.
so
It's counterproductive
there
to our
has
mission.
there has to be a conversation. There has to
Mm-hmm.
be a conversation amongst leaders. There has to be a conversation amongst the body so that you can understand like what they need, right? There has to be a conversation so that you're able to provide or to change the way that you deliver the services that are needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so. But let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take too much
Mm-hmm.
more of your time today.
Sure.
Um, so in a few minutes, could you let me know like how would you advise somebody? Um, let's just say practically, that's having issues with overcoming some type of traumatic event or overcoming some type of abuse that they've never really ever shared or talked to anybody about, right? Like, and they're realizing that it kind of it's starting to affect their lives now. They're starting to see things as a result of this. This stems back to some things that they know happened to them, that they never processed or dealt with. What is this some practical advice or steps you could give somebody in that situation?
Um, so again, let me just reiterate this, that people experience trauma in different ways. And so everything doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
So the best advice that I can say is for that person to go and find someone to talk to, a counselor, a therapist, same thing, but um, social worker, someone who can help them kind of work out and give them some practical skills, like that is specific to their symptoms and their
I got
situation.
I
You
got
know
you.
what I mean? I
Hmm.
can honestly say, I can say, hey, um, let me tell you, you should do some breathing, right? Let me give you some other coping skills. But that's kind of it works hand in hand with the treatment that you're provided,
Gotcha.
right? So, you know, I can say that, not to isolate themselves, but if if they're distrustful, how do you get them to, or anxious, how do you get them to not isolate? So it all comes back to like, get help, find someone that you can talk to. And if people are feeling like their life is worthless and they have no way out, 988 is the suicide hotline. They have trained people who can talk to you and help you. If you're feeling like you don't want to talk to someone and you're feeling like you just need some help, call 911. They will send someone to you, and you can, go to a hospital and receive help there. There's lots of help. Mental health is on the forefront of everyone's minds right now, and
Right.
so there's lots of things that people, or lots of places that people can reach out to get help. And if you, Rose, have if you need any other like resources, just let me know, and I'd be happy
Okay.
to like, make sure that you have all of that stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that'd be great. So if anybody want to reach out and make a comment or reach out to us that need any of these type of resources,
Mm-hmm.
we can definitely make sure we get them in your hands. And I don't know how your practice works, but uh, like Miss Luton said, talk to somebody. Find
Yeah.
somebody to talk to, you know. Leave a comment. I'm sure she could be a resource to you to direct you to somebody to talk to, but it's crucial that you find somebody to talk to, um, that's going to be able to help you navigate this. And I'll pray for you. Like, I'll definitely pray for you. Like, comments down, whatever you got going on, I'll bring it before the Lord and pray for you. But also, you need to take practical steps as well in conjunction with the prayer, to get the help that you need. So thank you, Aisha.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your time, sister. I appreciate the work that you do, all the people that you help, all the people that you touch. God bless you and your ministry and what you do every single day. And, and
Thank you.
and I know some of the things that you may see may be rough to deal with. So we just pray that God will help you and give you the courage and the strength and the peace that you need to navigate all of those challenging situations that you address all the time. So we
Yes.
appreciate you, sister.
Yes, I need all of that. All of that.
The community be praying for
The
you.
whole armor.
That's exactly what the next installment is. That's what we're working on right now. So yeah, stay tuned. It'll be up soon.
All right.
Love you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.